The state superintendent proposes a capital gains tax. So what is that? Well, when you make money on an investment, for example, selling a stock or a bond, the state can tax your profit. In this case, OSPI proposes an 8% tax on single filers who make more than $25,000 a year from their investment. Couples would need to make more than $50,000 a year. They would be among the higher earners in the state. By OSP's calculations, this would impact 53,000 households in Washington and would generate $1 billion for the state each year. So under this proposal, OSPI hopes to use half of that new capital gains tax revenue to provide some relief for everyone who's paying property taxes to fund education. The average household in King, Snohomish, and Pierce counties could see a $1,500 drop in their property taxes. The property tax break is designed to allow districts to increase levies if they choose, so they can fund various projects in their communities, such as building a new school or creating a new class program. As for the other half of that money, the capital gains revenue would go to these state priorities: increasing funding for special education teachers, hiring more nurses and middle school counselors, expanding career and technical education programs and job training. $14 million would go to expanding dual language programs and hiring bilingual teachers. We should mention this is only an early proposal at this point from the superintendent. Now it's up to Governor Inslee to release his own budget proposal, and then in the next legislative session it goes to the House and Senate to really dig into this and keep hammering out that spending plan.